Thanks, Nancy. Well, this is a great day. I just really always love doing these webinars with you. Thank you. And I love seeing so many beautiful MEEC students here, former and present, joining us, and all of the people that are joining us either here in person and on the recording later on, because I know there's a lot of people working and they'll be opening from wherever they are. So at this moment, just from wherever you are, let's begin in gratitude and humility for the ground that we all are living and standing on or sitting on or working on today, the lands we inhabit. And Royal Roads is situated on traditional and unceded lands of the Kasapsum and the Lekwungen peoples, at their ancestors and their families. And we're really grateful to be on these lands. We learn a lot from these lands every day, and particularly these students here know a lot about having an intimacy with land as teacher. So our work is to cultivate these deep roots and rich relationships of reciprocity and regeneration and increased connectedness, increased relatedness between humans and the more than human world. And we celebrate an education that recognizes the world as intelligent and alive and a whole earth system. We treat knowledge as a living presence that needs to be fed and that feeds us. So it's a beautiful form of reciprocity. So wherever you are, just a moment of great gratitude, a deep breath into your body of presence and thanks for the lands that we're on. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you. And here, just to make sure we're all in the good room, we're here to talk about what we call the MAEEC program, the Master of Art in Environmental Education and Communication. And we have Hilary, the program head, with us that just did an amazing introduction. And we have a lot of students too. So I think, Hilary, if you want to introduce the students, I can just say as well that my name is Nancy Prévost-Maurice, and I'm an education specialist here at Royal Road. And behind the scene, we have Rhonda White that is here from the enrollment team that will post a few useful links for you in the chat.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Nancy and Rhonda, and for Kish and Heather being on this call too. You know, if we're going to begin in gratitude, I just have to say that we can't do any of these things without each other. And it takes a lot to put on these webinars. So I'm always in great awe and gratitude that these things come together. So thank you so much for being with us. And today we have newly crossed the threshold of finishing his research, Walter Cheatham from Florida. Hello, Walter, yay. We have Rhonda DeVille, who finished a while back, but whose work is still sending out these ripples, you know, looking at art in the prairie grasslands as a form of conservation. Like, hello, Rhonda. There you are with your art behind you. And Clea Roddick, who is a current student you're going into your third year this summer, and who is working in a beautiful way, a reflective way with forests and music. And she's a wild educator. I think that's like, if you only have 2 or 3 words to say, it's pretty hard to put it into 2 or 3 words, but I've done it. And we have Carla Shore, who has finished a while back too. But Carla did exceptional work with podcasts. And using those as a teaching tool and looking at some very evocative questions, because Carla is a questioner, which makes for good research. Hello, Carla. And Heidi, last but not least, is just today submitted a draft of her major research project that is really focuses on well-being and belonging in nature responsive practices for teachers and the kinds of ripples that that sends out pedagogically. So yum, yum, yum. Here we go.
Wonderful.
Right.
And the agenda for today is quite simple. We'll do a brief overview of Royal Roads. We really want to have a conversation with students. We'll finish with some admission and application requirements, and we'll welcome your question throughout the session. So really feel free to connect with us, ask any question, and we'll just answer as we go. And here's just a snapshot of the campus. I hope some of you have come before. Maybe you can use your heart or in any emoji you can use to let us know if you have come to campus before. So we have on the top left Hatley Castle, which I believe is the most iconic building on campus. On the top right, we have the Japanese garden, because at Railroads we have 565 acres of nature, trails, gardens. So it's always a lovely place, lovely spot to go for homework, connect with your cohort, or just have a walk with your families and friends. At the bottom left, we have the Esquimalt Lagoon. So the campus is facing this bird sanctuary. On the other side, we have the Olympic Mountains in the States. So lovely, peaceful area to go on. And at the bottom right is just a reminder that we do online learning for 25 years. And I'm sure we'll have the occasion to talk about it a bit later, but it's really, Railroad University was built to be online since 1995. So it's not something we have pivoted to, it's really something we do since day one. We're also a changemaker campus. So we really believe in social innovation, leaderships. It's all at the core of Railroad. And I invite you to just type maybe in Google Ashoka U to learn more about this. But we're very proud to be a changemaker campus with Ashoka.
So I'm going to just interject there quickly.
Yes.
And say what that means is, and we were in a marketing meeting today, so it's important to say what that means. And that means that in some ways, part of this is fulfilled by the applied learning and the applied research that students are doing, which we're going to hear about now. So like, what does it matter? You know, because does this research actually make a world of difference? And it is the kind of thing that sometimes a small thing can make these ripples of difference. And you know, specifically, I'm thinking of you right now, Heidi, and I'll probably start with you, but just speaking about what applied means and what change making means in the process of doing your research. But if we can go to the next slide, Nance, and I will start with Heidi. I think I wrote Reconnection Workshop for Alberta Teachers through Applied Learning. So Heidi, I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm actually going to ask you all the same question at the same time, but I'll start with Heidi. And so particularly if you can say something about what surprised you the most about grad school, like before you came and your expectations of it, and particularly now about doing research, what has been most surprising for you?
That you can't fake it. I think I'm surprised how much of the humanness that's called forth through Railroads. I think that's, without whether or not I knew it at the time, what drew me to the campus. That, you know, Hilary as a person, you know, Gio as a person. I had him as a communications undergrad professor. So you can't fake it. You can't pretend that this is going to be light work. It has to really be something that means something to you, and that comes from that will show through in your research.
Rhonda, can you answer that question for me? What surprised you about going through the grad school experience, and particularly your research?
I think one thing that really came forward soon, in like early in the whole process, was it was the diversity of age, because I came to education after being out of education for 20 some years as a mature student at 45. and I still felt so included, and I felt my voice was necessary. And it took me a long time to actually break out of my shell. When you say you can't fake it, it's true. It's when you come back to education, I think sometimes in my case, it was letting down some barriers of things that I had held as a perspective of what academia was and how much academia had changed. So
that's interesting to hear. I mean, so often we get the gears about how we haven't changed at all. So I love hearing that. And I love that the changes become evident through your research and through the growth that you experience. Walter, can you say something about your grad school experience, did it surprise you? Or, doing your research, what surprised you? What came up for you?
Yeah, the word that keeps coming to mind is unraveling.
Mm.
I like what Heidi said about you can't fake it, and the model itself doesn't allow for a lack of authenticity. It pulls it out of you. And the whole experience was surprising, but ultimately it was the unraveling, and then the coalescing that took place. It was truly an embodied transformative experience, and that surprised me immensely compared to the other graduate programs that
Sorry. Go ahead, Walter.
I was expecting something more abstracted and intellectual rather than,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better word, ontological and existential.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it's kind of that, this is where we talk about intersectionality, that it's all those things. It isn't just theory. We're putting things into practice. We're actually testing ourselves, testing our mettle, and that's why we always say it isn't so much about mastery of content, because anyone can learn that. It's about how you metabolize that and how you start to bring that into the world. I mean, I think what you mean by coalescing, when it all starts to come together. There's some points in research, though, where I know we all wonder, will I ever become coherent? I mean, when will this happen? Hopefully it's on the day when you're presenting. Carla, can you say something about your experience and what surprised you about your grad school experience and what happened with you doing your research?
Well, if I could just start, what surprised me the most was how much art there was.
Ah, that's good. Yep. You could also include poetry there.
That too. Lots of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have to echo what Rhonda said about the diversity of people there. I too was a mature student, and it surprised me that the differences between us in age, in work experience, all of that faded away, and we really were each other's support system, each other's teachers. And this program melds education with communications. And when I started, I felt like everybody was from education, but I was from communications. And that too melted away, and it just became one program for us. And I think that was a big revelation for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're not separate. We do see them as a domain, an EEC domain. I'll end with Clea here on this question. Clea, what has been surprising for you with grad school and with doing your research now? Because you're in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, I'm in the process, so it's a bit of the thicket of the research, but I'm resonating with what everyone else is saying. And I think what really surprised me the most is how much of myself had to come forth, and parts of me that I wasn't expecting to use. And I also had the sense that it was going to be academic, and of course it is. But this encouragement to have the courage really to actually do your research in the world and to follow intuition and really like strong sense of what needs to be studied. And sometimes, I can get into like, why am I even doing this? Because that's kind of where I am sometimes. But then when I go back into the research, if I am conducting the research in the fully authentic process that I am committed to, it feels completely necessary.
Yeah.
So there's just this continual reassurance from the research itself. So I would say the data is affecting me, and I'll have more to answer this question next year.
Or just in a few months. Because
exactly.
Deadlines loom.
But it's transformative, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it uses all of you and beyond what you knew was there.
And because I'm hearing authenticity throughout what you guys are sharing, you know, there's the no faking it. There's the no going, you know, it's a bell you can't unring. I mean, there's even stuff you don't even want to look at, but that's there too. So, I mean, it brings up everything, right? I mean, it reminds me of when Carl Jung said, I don't want to live a good life. I want to live a whole life. So it feels more like a whole experience, although there are some parts of it that are difficult. I mean, definite challenges. Carla, I just want to go back to you because this second question and second and third question I have kind of relate a little bit to what your experience was, I think, most profoundly. So has your research, has grad school or your research changed you, influenced your work, you know, your, you know, worldviews, relationship with self? But can you speak about something around your work around this? Because things did shift for you, didn't they?
I went to grad school because I wanted to become a post-secondary teacher, and I was told that without a master's, I wouldn't be able to get the jobs I wanted to. Having ticked that box, yep, I am now teaching full-time at a university and a college. So in that sense, yes. Well, full-time as a sessional, so yeah. But also definitely change the research, the way that I approach research, the things I learned. A lot of it was a continuation of the way I'd been doing my communications practice. The people I talked to, the way I interviewed them, the way I put it together. But the fact that I combined the academic with what I already knew in terms of communications, to add the academic layer on there, has had a big effect on how I'm interacting on campus with my students, how I understand their experience, and how I approach my career. That it's not just about communications consulting anymore. It's not just about public relations, you know, for clients with an environmental point of view. It really has changed my focus to more academic and opened me up to where the environmental side fits into everything else I do.
You know, Carla, it's so interesting when you say that, you know, it was your skills you brought from before. Like when we say flexible admissions, when we say we really look at prior learning, it's really important to bring that in and build upon that so that your research is authentic. So it wasn't something that didn't have anything to do with who you are. It built upon that, but it also expanded it. So it's like that include and transcend in systems thinking, you know, that you kept building on and moving toward the next. I love hearing your story, and your podcasts were absolutely, to me, I say they're CBC quality. I mean, they're just such beautiful teaching tools. So I love that your final research became something you can also keep sharing and using, and not just something that ended up on a shelf. Heidi,
Thank you.
I want to go back to you and say, has your work that you've just submitted, has it changed you? Has it changed your relationships, your work, your, you know, your level of confidence as a teacher? What's happened for you?
Yeah, in short, yes, it has changed me. I think I'm still in the middle of this change, of this emergence. I don't think I've quite, you know, understood or absorbed or integrated it to its full extent. And I don't know if there really is it's a continuing emergence. It's changed me in the sense that I could read these concepts. I remember we have a systems theory class with Jason Young as part of this program. And I'd never been exposed to systems theory before. And I was often very cross-eyed at the beginning, not understanding how I was supposed to make sense of this, and just, you know, fiddling my way along. And it really, you know, required me to shut my brain off at certain times and just say, okay, what is this, you know, feeling for me? And what is this then, you know, how can I then explain it afterwards? So I'd say the research has allowed me to sit with and process and reflect on those concepts to the point where I can now feel them coming into as part of my worldview and my perspective.
Okay, and I would even say you're a bit like running water, because today you wanted to bring an exercise. You said, do we have time? Can I bring an exercise? I mean, I see the teacher in you has been just, you know, you've lit a fire under yourself. It's quite something to watch you. You're unstoppable now. So I love seeing that, see this right away, this start to happen. So thanks. Walter, I
Yeah,
just
thank
want
you.
to say something about the unraveling. Has this unraveling continued, or are you starting to, make the great turning into your next and your work or your sense of self, or what's next for you?
It's a blessed not knowing is the place that I am right now. The thesis journey from proposal to now was like a giant water slide. And if anything, I'm coming to the bottom curve as things start to slow down. But the research itself, I mean, to be completely honest, in the spirit of MAEEC, it took me apart, and then the leading all the way up to the defense, it was a reassembling, and the coming out of the research, being done with it, is trying to figure out what to do with what's been reassembled and get to know what's been reassembled. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, if I wonder about a world, if we would give ourselves some time to sit in uncertainty, then I think regenerative ways would start to emerge. It's pretty often we're just taught to just go to the next, and the next, and the next, and to keep going. But, there is something really still very beautiful about your openness and allowing yourself to come undone through this process. That's kind of like that unlearning. I almost want to leave space when it comes to marking for the things that weren't said yet. If we could only give a percentage for what wasn't spoken or what couldn't actually form into words yet. And while that may seem abstract to someone who's thinking about doing a program, it becomes really important when you're in the thick of it to provide yourself some of that space and care. Because really it's like when I went to grad school, it just turned me on my ear. And I needed that turning. I was, kind of going down a very narrow path. So I think sometimes we need to just sit with that. And so I'm going to talk to Rhonda now and just ask Rhonda about, what happened, what changed when you finished, and, did you go buy a massive amount of paints, which I do know you did, but, what's happening now with your grasslands and conservation and your ideas around art as a way to move people? What's happening with that?
Well, it's been interesting because I wear two hats. My background is in landscape architecture, and I had an opportunity to actually work with some teachers at a Montessori school and to sit and reflect on their curriculum and how they could teach using a landscape design of an outdoor classroom that we had just created for them as far as the conceptual design. So the art and the science came together through education in a way that was really focused on mentorship. And I'm continuing to work with the group and doing volunteer work with that school to actually bring curriculum and their outdoor learning space together. So that's one thing that has evolved. And yes, you're right, guilty pleasures. The art store loves me. I am a very good patron of the art store. And actually, I have to be very grateful for the fact that you pushed me to include my art in my thesis, because through a lot of the doodling that I did of class notes and whatnot, I realized that I had really lost my connection in communicating through art. So it's not just the teaching of landscape in the prairies. It really is about communicating that through a different mode that is a passion of mine. And it, it really brought me back to why I went into landscape architecture, being art and science. And here I am in environmental education, still using art and science.
Well, that's interesting that, it reminds me of the term supervisor. So someone to oversee and say, hey, wouldn't it be ironic if you're interviewing film directors, if you didn't make a film? It can be really ironic that we don't include our own art when we're talking with artists or, any of those skills at those levels that we want to bring up. And that reminds me next of Clea, because you're a musician and an artist. And so you're recklessly insisting with yourself on bringing your music into this, to bear with your research. Can you say anything about how your relationships or worldviews or sense of self have been shifting through this process that you're in right now? You're in the thicket.
It's interesting because I do have a background in music, but a keen interest in environmental education, as well as I've often participated in not in the school system, but in multiple other environmental education settings. And so I went to pursue this degree, given that I feel like this urgency. I'm a mother of 3 children, and I feel this sense of urgency for the world, as I imagine many people who are on this call do. What I didn't expect was that this research would really return me back into using music and poetry as a form of communication. And so just kind of connecting to what Rhonda is saying there, this is environmental education and communication. And I got really interested in place responsive theory. So I'll just say for those that are joining us, that's really a practice of connecting deeply with place. And because of this practice, which has now become part of my research, I am continually reminded of the ways that song and poetry have long been used by humans to communicate their relationship with each other and with the land. And so it's a tool that I have, but it also is something that I didn't come into this initially into this journey into post-secondary education thinking that I was going to be doing music, but it just, as it turns out, art and communication go so well together when we're trying to work with these kind of strong messages, and we are trying to communicate and educate, but also we're trying to persevere for ourselves and retain our own soul and humanity. And it feels like it's a way to express and also participate in our own sense of belonging to our local places, where we can be responsive in a way that is authentic, because we're actually considering the voices of the other beings in our landscape. So it's something that it keeps coming back, and the deeper I go into it, the more I realize that there's other languages to express ourselves with. So art, if we consider that to be a language that has a way to find and express meaning, and to weave that with the written, because of course we have to write and create our written final projects, but it is a way of kind of expressing on this kind of more embodied way, or to weave in the academic with the felt sense of actually participating with place.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That would be a new definition for applied. I think I'm going to send this link of today to our marketing folks, because we had this conversation today about what applied looks like. And some people don't know what applied means, but that means just so many levels of application of your life with your work, with your learning, with your sense of self, with your ancestry, with the land, with relationships. Talk about intersectionality. Okay, one last question for the lot of you. I'm going to kind of combine them together. So, we all know that, we've been all under tremendous energies in the world, big energies moving through with the pandemic, worldwide pandemic, and so many cracks have come to the fore, so many fissures that, you know, and you know me, that I'm someone who believes that the dark is generative and that it's time we turn toward these difficulties because they're here to teach us. And we've long ignored some of the most important aspects of our whole humanness and our connectedness. And so given that that stuff is going on, you know, and obviously you sacrificed a lot to come to school while you were working and tending families and being participants in your communities. So, you know, and I've heard from you mothers and fathers and those who are working. And so how did you do it? What challenges were your greatest challenges? And you know, what advice might you give for someone coming to do this MA? I mean, being realistic, but also being, you know, I know you all have this impossible optimism too, coming out of this program. So maybe I'll start with you, Carla, if that's okay.
Sure. You know, time management was a big deal. Obviously, at the time I had 2 kids in high school when I started, and I have 2 kids in university when I finished. And you know, it was another thing added to my plate. I think the best advice I got from a former MAEEC student when I was considering the program was, she said, I set aside time twice a week where I would go to the library, and that would be my MAEEC time. That would be my Royal Roads time. I didn't have to go to the library for that, but I did definitely schedule it on my calendar to make sure that I found the time to do it. The other bit of advice was, well, you guys are going to do this in person, but like the first residency, to get away from my home, get away from my family, to be somewhere with my fellow students and focusing on it, that made a big difference. And our next 2 residencies were online, which kind of sucks, but what can you do, COVID, you know? But even for those, I made a point of getting away from my home and getting away from my family. The first year I rented a cabin in the Okanagan.
Yeah,
I did. I rented a cabin in the Okanagan just so that I could not be home and just focus on it. And that enabled me to put the rest of the work to the side for the most part, but not entirely. We also made connections with other students who lived locally too. There was a group in Victoria, there was a group of us in the Lower Mainland that got together, there was a group that got together between Sudbury and Halifax. Like the personal connections really help keep you motivated, and checking in regularly when we're in the online part also really helps. You know, the group work really focused us to get to know each other quickly, but also just having that connection with the groups really helped remind you that you needed to really put the time aside and do this.
so you would say to someone, do this degree?
You know, the third years when I was in first year did something for us, and they talked about when it came to their theses, having an accountability buddy or accountability buddy, if I'm saying that right. And some of us in my year did that, you know, checking in with each other. How are you doing on your MRP? Are you almost done? How's your research? And sharing resources, and that really helped. You know, I know we're all saying this, and if you're sitting outside the program, you probably don't think we're making it up. But honestly, the sense of community by doing this as a cohort program is not just the strength of the program, but it is a huge part of what will make you love this program, is having that group of people to work together with, to learn from, to keep each other on track, to keep each other focused. It's more than just your friend who's taking the class with you. It really is, you're a cohort and you feel it. Thank you, Carla. And I'm going to move over to Heidi now. I know Heidi has little children waiting on her, so we want to release her as soon as we can. But Heidi, you know, how have you been able to balance this, and what are your challenges, and what might you say to a prospective student? You know, any one of those 3 things.
Yeah, I think, Hilary, what resonated with what you were saying earlier is the pivotal time, you know, that we are in this program. I felt like through the work and the studies, I was able to understand and at times be, you know, confused absolutely by what's happening in the world and what was happening at school. But now that I'm farther along in the program, feeling much more optimistic and feeling much more capable to live in this world and in these times. I think that's what's really, if I were to say to any prospective student, if you are looking for something to feel fit for this world, that this is a program that you can come out the other side feeling that way. And I would also say it's completely human to feel, as I think myself and a number of my cohort friends have now said, to feel confused, to feel intimidated, to feel, ill-equipped at the beginning of the program. I think that's a welcome human response, and you're safe and welcome in doing that.
And I mean this in the best sense, but if we're not trembling at the gates of something, then it's really not that important to us.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
big change is coming. Some part of you already knows that you're going to be changed by this experience. And thank you for that. I love being fit for the world. That's what Duncan and I speak about often, is the whole fitness, not just the physical fitness, but really fit emotionally and spiritually and mentally for this world as well as physically. Okay, now off you run with your small children. Bye-bye. And so, Walter, I'm going to turn to you and ask you about some of the challenges that you faced. Maybe you kind of touched on them. You've touched on them the whole time, but maybe turning that into some advice for someone. If someone was saying, hey, Walter, I'm considering taking this program. What's your take on it? What do you think? Are you muted? No.
I battled with this question in the pregame about what to say, because I wanted to say something along the lines of show up with your whole self, or you get out what you put in, some sort of platitude along those lines. But the platitudes ring true. It's that if you are, the idea of the kind of like the Saturn return comes to bear, because you enter, and I say this speaking for other people that I've talked to about this as well, and those of you fellow MEEC student, current and former MEEC students, you come in with preconceived notions, both of what the program is, more importantly of what yourself is and yourself within community is, and then you get pulled into this series of relationships with an institution, with other members, into this heavily agonistic community. And then you take that and translate it. I like the word you use, metabolize it into the world around you. And I guess the advice would be is be prepared to face those things. Be ready. Be I like what Heidi said, confused. Be ready to be confused and be terrified, because that's where the growth happens, and that's what this program has really provided.
Yeah, it reminds me of what David White says, be just a half shade braver. Don't have to be a full shade, just a half shade, to be able to step in and say, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to do this because I want something different to happen in my life. I mean, for me, stepping at the threshold of the MA at SFU, I just knew there had to be another way to live. I didn't know what it was. I had no clue of what was going to happen to me, but I really wanted something else to happen to me. I just thought this can't be all there is. So Rhonda, do you want to respond here with some of what challenges you've faced and maybe some advice for someone coming in?
I guess there's three things that popped to mind when you first asked that question. I definitely would agree with the time management. Ooh, that's a big one, because life happens. My dad passed away during this writing my thesis. I had a major concussion, and I have to say, if it wasn't for the instructors, my whole prof, everyone from start to finish, always provided this immense support that was like a hug, but it was also a push to keep doing better and keep putting myself out there and keep moving ahead. The resources at Royal Roads, I'm just going to give a huge thank you to the library, the research center, the writing center, amazing, amazing support and resources that I think, and this is coming from a place where I used to be a college instructor. It really is outstanding. And the online support is, you know, you think, oh, it's going to be online. Well, they have your back. They have you back all the time. And there's many times that I reached out to the library and the writing center outside of being on campus, as well as being on campus. And the support was amazing. So, you know, don't just look at your cohort for support. There's a whole team of people that are there for you at Royal Roads, starting with your instructors, but not to be outdone by the writing center and the library and the research. And I guess the last thing that I would say is my piece of advice is there's something that brought you to Royal Roads, something that brought you to this program. And for me, it was to do purposeful work. And throughout all of my classes, throughout all of the assignments, throughout my whole thesis journey, right till the very moment that I defend it, I truly believe that the work that I did was done with purpose. And I have come out even more feeling that more. As you can tell, I'm getting a little bit clumped by it all, but really living it. Like you know, you live it, but it pushes you to really get to know what your purpose is.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
So beautiful. And Clea, you get the last word. Last but not least. Challenge.
And I just resonate so much with what you just said. So I'm just going to pick up on that and just, and also Hilary, you quoted David White, and it makes me think of when he says, all your intuitions are true.
That's it.
It does, there is, you do feel called towards a certain segment in the work. Like there's a reason why you came and are attracted to this program, but also as you're going through and doing all the assignments, you can be weaving a thread right from the start, like right as you're beginning your first assignments in your first residency, or at least that's the experience I had, to sort of build upon. And then now coming into the final research project, I feel like grateful that I was able to kind of gradually be accumulating, sometimes not realizing, you know, how it was going to sort of assemble together. But to that end, a little bit of practical advice. There is a moment when you come to the research methods course, and at that point, as you know, like you're sort of coming out of the systems thinking, which is really big picture, and you're a bit blown apart with the suddenly recognizing all the relationships with the systems in your lives and the different scales of things, and to remember and pull back into those main threads that you've been sort of weaving along the way, and try to enter into that research methods course with if you can, with a strong sense of what your final project will be. And I'm saying that as someone who had to continually rewrite after. So I learned a bit along the way, because I was still washing around in the water a bit, and I feel like I could have channeled myself a little sooner. So that's just a little bit of practical advice. But other than that, yeah, like Walter said, dive deep in. It's fun. I don't think anyone has said this yet, but it's really fun, and the people are great. The relationships are awesome, and it just opens you up. So no regrets.
And, you know, just when you're talking about research in that way, I just kept thinking to myself, yes, you know, it's iterative. You know, sometimes you need those 5 proposals to get to that gem-like experience. I mean, we all come to things in different ways, but I love this. It is fun. And so thank you, you guys. You know, I always just really want to hear people's stories. I think stories really are things that people can relate to when they're making a decision. And who better than you folks who have come through it or are going through it right now. And you have such a beautiful perspective, each one unique, and yet somehow they're all connected. And so bless you in your not knowing, Walter, in your blessed not knowing. And thank you, Carla, for taking time out today. Beautiful words. And Clea, always, it's like poetry. And Rhonda, with your beautiful emotions. I thank you so much. And Heidi, who's left us, who is really in the thick of it. The confidence I see in her now is just spectacular. She really wanted us to do something here, an experience. She wanted to lead. I just had to say, whoa, it's fantastic. But, just seeing these changes is miraculous to me. I feel very privileged. So thank you all. You can stay on if you want, but we're going to get into the logistics now. So blessings on your good health and see you soon. Yeah. Okay. Nancy, we're.
What a great conversation. Thank you, Hilary. Yeah.
Bye, guys. Yeah. So we're going to move through this pretty quickly. You've heard from people that this is a blended program. It combines online and on campus.
Yeah.
Next slide. It begins in a laddered approach with a graduate certificate in environmental education and communication. Next slide, please, which are the first 3 courses. It's 5 months long, and there's a 3-week on-campus residency that is the first 2 courses, and then 1 distance semester. So it's 9 credits, and the courses are developing an environmental understanding, foundations for environmental communication, and learning theory and program design. And these 3 things comprise that graduate certificate. So they're really 3 of the deep foundational courses of the whole MA and the diploma and the MA. So let's carry on. And so here we go to the diploma, which is really in essence, all the coursework without the final thesis or the MRP, which we say MRP, major research project, is the option to the thesis. I'll get into that in a moment. So the format is a year long. It has 2 3-week on-campus residencies that are mandatory. And that's what the students were talking about. It's those, Carla particularly was saying, it's those times you get together that you really get to know each other, so that when you go online, you're not strangers. It's not distance learning. You're still very much engaged and you know each other much better than if you just started online. And it's 24 credits. It's all the coursework. So next slide, please. This is the listing of the courses. You'll recognize the first 3 from the certificate. Then you heard about systems, which is the one that Cleo was just talking about with Jason Young. It's a fantastic course. Then you go into your research methods, worldviews and ethics. Your second residency is ecopsychology, which is the course I teach. And then biosphere and sustainability, which is presented with Indigenous communities, coastal communities in situ as a field school. Yeah. And then the whole MA, next slide, please, is all of the coursework plus a final completion project or thesis. So it's 2 3 weeks on campus on residency. It's a distance and face-to-face. It's 36 credits. Next slide, please. So it's all of the courses I just mentioned, and the final 2 is either a thesis for 12 credits or the major research project for 9 credits plus an elective. So the MRP, the difference between the thesis and the MRP, the thesis is a very deep dive into literature and theory, and is usually mostly a written text, and comprises 12 credits and the amount of hours it takes to achieve that. The major research project is often more applied in that it can be, as Carla did, a series of podcasts. She also had a paper that went with that to explain the theory as a subtext and to explain what she was doing, but it became a teaching tool. And Heidi has done an MRP, which is developing a program for teachers and running it, prototyping it, and then making recommendations on it. And so she did that as her major research project. So a smaller paper, but more of an applied and active kind of learning. So, but Rhonda did a thesis using art and interviewing artists, prairie artists. Walter did a thesis on regenerative agriculture in community. And, you know, so it's everyone's doing something that suits them and suits their learning needs and is authentic to them. Next slide, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Hilary, for connecting the dots. I think it makes a lot of sense of what the student just shared and how the program works. Yeah. And if we just, and there's a few questions in the chat, if you want to look at them, we can come back after the admission requirement. We can chat with people if needs be. But for people watching the recording or people live right now, you might ask yourself, okay, so what's the next step? How can I apply? So at Royal Roads, we have two types of admission, and it's pretty unique to us. So we have the standard admission, where you will come in with a 4-year undergrad degree with a minimum GPA of B. We ask for 2 years of relevant work or volunteer experience. And for the people without the GPA of B, you can take some courses here at the Professional and Continuous Studies at Royal Road, which are called Academic Writing and Critical Thinking, and gain a grade of B. So this is one option. Yeah.
And Nancy, it's at least 2 years. It's not just 2 years of relevant experience. It's at least 2 years.
That's a
We're
good
looking
point.
for people to speak about more. I do want to answer this question here just about research from Ashley.
Yeah.
So some folks come having an idea of what they might research. And when Nancy will speak to you now about what's part of your package when you come through, the admissions process, you're going to write a personal statement. And in that personal statement, you might have an inkling about what you'd like to research, but you don't have to come in with that fully formed. Often that with your coursework and with working with your cohort and the things that happen to you during this process, things get clearer and clearer, and you might even come out with something different than what you started with. But it's a process, and we support you all the way along. From the first day you're here, we start talking about the lens you bring. And as Clea said, you bring it all the way through your coursework. You could just keep building on that knowledge, or build those knowledge gaps, start to fill those knowledge gaps. Sorry, so go ahead, Nance.
Wonderful. No, that's great. And I think this is why the cohort, like as the student mentioned, the cohort are so strong, because we have people from a variety of work experience and volunteer, but people are quite advanced as well in their career. So it's not like people just coming out from high school, for example, or from college. So that's great. And the other option here is flexible admission. So when you don't meet the standard admission, you can still apply, and our team with the enrollment team will decide if you can get in the program with flexible admission. And this is normally 6 years of relevant work experience, or the equivalent combination of education and experience. And we will also require you to take the Professional and Continuous Studies class. Anything to add to this, Hilary?
No.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering how can you apply now, so it's pretty simple. You have 10 steps to follow on the website if you want to go to royalroads.ca, and you will start an online application. So you'll submit a payment of $128.81, and then you'll get an application ID to start submitting your documents. And I see there's Randa in the chat adding more details. That's awesome. So the supporting documents we're asking is the official transcript of any post-secondary education you got. So your past institution will share the transcript with our team here, and you will work on your own to do the detailed resume and the personal statement that Hilary just mentioned. So the resume is really showing us what you have done as work, volunteer, education. So it's kind of more than a resume you'll send for work. It's really like thinking about the program and why you want to get in. And the personal statement, we have some guidelines again on the website. So it's really, we want to know who you are, where you come from, and where you're going. So we really want to see and learn more about yourself. Same thing with the letters of reference. We often recommend that you submit your personal statement to the people that will write your letters of reference, so they know why you want to get on board with the program. And those letters of reference can be someone from the academic, professional lens as well.
So I just want to say two things here. Sometimes if you've been out of school for a while, you might not have an academic reference. So they can both be professional references. They just can't be someone like your best friend writing for you. Or it could be somebody you volunteered for. But I wouldn't say the resume is why you want to get in. I'd say the resume has to really speak to all of your vast experience, including volunteer and things that you might not think even deserve to go on a resume, because we really want to see a rounded picture of your experiences, and then to unpack those in the personal statement to really give us an idea of what it is you're bringing to the program as much as what you want to get from it. So it's this reciprocity we're interested in hearing. What is it you're going to bring? How will you be a boon to the program? And what is it that you see yourself doing with this education as you move forward into the world?
100%. And I got a question here in the chat to myself of, is that okay if I've been out of school for many years and I want to come back? And you just answered that. Thank you. Yeah. So your resume will show what you have been doing in the past years. Totally.
Also, we don't always just look at your marks from before. I mean, that's why the academic writing and critical thinking course is really helpful to get your tools of writing. Academic writing is different than any other form of writing, and it needs a kind of a sharpened sense so that when you're here doing the work, you're not caught up on the writing. The writing is just something that'll flow and you can be caught up on the ideas and the content. But yes, don't let it hold you back if you haven't been to school for some time. And here's our next intake.
Yeah, so we have an intake coming up in July. And as mentioned here, the deadline has been extended. So if you're watching it today and the recording, or you're live with us and you want to apply it, there's still time to start your application. And we'll have a program starting next summer as well in 2023.
But really get that application started. You don't have to have it all complete. Just get it started and you can start sending in documents. Even if you pass that deadline, it's still possible to make it. Lots of people get in under the wire. And I mean, there's no time like the present, as you heard from these students today. You know, they would all recommend this program to come now. You know, another 2 years will go by and you could have a master's degree.
That's a wonderful point. Yeah. And the fact that we assess on a daily basis. So if you apply today, we'll just go and walk you through for the 2022 or 2023 intake. And here we go with financial aid. We're almost done. Thank you for people. I see that we're just past 1 o'clock, but thank you for staying with us. Financial aid, we know that it's a huge component to going back to school. So I invite you to maybe do a print screen or take a picture of this slide and make sure to go online and visit our team there at the financial aid, because they can really help you, with like external grant, internal grant, really trying to make it work for yourself. And here, as I was mentioning, Rhonda White was with us today. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email learn.more@railroads.ca. If you're coming from outside Canada, please use learn.more.international@railroads.ca. And if you're ready to chat with someone right now, you can as well just scan the WhatsApp code here to be connected with one of us.
Wanda, just put the financial aid information in the chat room too.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure to share that with the recording. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks everyone for staying on, and thank you to the beautiful students that showed up today and supported future students by telling their stories. And please pass this link along to anyone you might think would be interested in this program, because we'd love to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.